Well, I have experience in board of directors of public and private companies. And our first question goes to our Professor Firmo, where we have our first question. We have two things totally opposed to our to reach a good economic development in our country. The Selic rate, we have the lowest Selic rate in the last years. We have 2% of the rate of interest in Brazil. And we have the pandemic in this worldwide pandemic. So if we could, in a situation, circumstantial situation, we could have excellent interest rate in terms of investments. I don't recall in the last years investment rate of 2%, a very low rate. But at the same time, we have this pandemic that hinders our investments in Brazil as a whole, in Northeast, obviously, making the investments, they decrease each day more, and practically in terms of productive sectors, to make the investments to decrease so much. And I ask you how you see this regarding Northeast. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this panel with you. Good morning, my fellow panelists. Oh, I would say that there's a question that put us in not in a precise answer. We have a global disorganization in economy, and we are in social area. With I'm sure that we'll have a future organization from the point of view, economical and the political point of view. Talking about taxes or rates, negative, low or high. Case of Brazil, in particular, the case of Northeast, actually is try to find a way to a future analysis, because the past is too bad and too poor regarding these subjects. We have a financial system that operating with its costs and its taxes and over taxes, and we have a productive sector operating this field beyond its own competition capacity, and so on. And since, well, the regional subject is much, it's far beyond of this retail positioning of the economy, considering the inflation rate, interest, budget, and investment are components that I call them the retail uh, retail part of the general problem of development. And you must think in the superior conditions, superior reasons that condition and establish the way, the pathway for the region and for its national integration. Well, that's true. Thank you for your answer, Professor Firmo. Very well, very well stated, and we've been seeing the development of the policies of development. We have circumstantial matters, but we have structural matters that talks much louder. And since we have this methodology of debate, we can go deeper in these subjects and answers. I'm at ease to do this in the way we are inside the agenda of the debate. Okay, Professor, thank you very much. We have another question, and this question is to our Professor Alexandre. Morning, Professor Alexandre. Can you hear me? Yes, good morning, Professor Pimentel and Professor Firmo. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to participate of this panel. Well, my pleasure, Professor Alexandre Manuel. Also talk a little bit about Professor Alexandre Manuel. If I'm mistaken in something, please correct me. He's an economist. He knows a lot about the federal, municipal, and state instances of administration, with a lot of experience in public and private companies. Okay, okay, Professor. That's correct. That's correct. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure to have you here with us. So I have a question here, a specific question for you, Professor Alexandre. Government should not present more uh, organized and like joint venture solutions with the public sector for the solutions. So Professor Firmo has been from Sudan, and Professor Alexandre advocates in the field of board of directors of public and private companies. We've been working at Sudan with fiscal subsidies. Well, I have a belief on this because we need more fiscal subsidies to be called equal in our region. I would like you to talk about this question related to more gather together action with the private and public sector aiming to developer policy. Well, as it's been stated just before, Brazil has a group of structural problems that in the last years we are seeing that not only changes or incentives of short term will make the country to grow again, to increase its productivity again. It's need to be clear that we need to address these structural problems. As you said, we have an exchange currency very, very uh, damaged, and we have a low interest rate. And since I've been studying, since I started to study economics, if we had high exchange and low rates, the country would enter in a development, and all the microeconomic economical problems would be addressed. But we saw in the last few years that it's not enough to resume the growth. So the state government had been setting a has been set in a group of agenda that could help a lot the Northeast. I can see I can tell about the rail station system, the cabotage system. They have in the states of Maranhão, Sergipe, and could have onshore plants and that could foster the employment and the entrepreneurial uh, issues in these regions. So these issues about fiscal subsidies could be set during this regulatory landmark. So this PIS and COFINS, the Brazilian taxes, they were sent to reform, but the reform is trying to equalize all the sectors, to equalize the industrial and services sector. And since we have this discussion in the northeastern region of Brazil regarding industrial sector development, it would develop a lot the industrial sector. It would take off all lots of fiscal constraints. We have a group of agenda that maybe they're maybe a little bit confused, may should be driven in a more transparent way. But we have these agendas about sewage, the sewage reform, and this gas project today to be voted to the National Congress, the cabotage project. navigation project to have access to other companies to explore this niche, to open the access to the maritime region. Northeast would benefit a lot, and these regulations, these reforms being regulated, we should think also with the group of the set of the fiscal benefits, because in Brazil these fiscal benefits, fiscal subsidies, they were set up without looking to the bigger picture. Each one arrived in the National Congress. They ask their benefit for the society, and we have no landmark, no milestone to assess if that incentive that is given in a way, in a correct way for some sector, benefited the society as a whole, as an employment or income should spread to the other sectors. So the questions of fiscal benefit or subsidies, it's not an evil subject. Oh, it's untalkable. So this look is a very small-minded, narrow-minded look. So the fiscal incentives and subsidies should be seen as some with broader vision to improve the externality or the social of the sectors of that sector, particular sector can generate. So this taxes incentives should be looked with this group of the reforms being the ongoing reforms. What we are seeing the last few years from 2005 and 2006, we had 2% of the GDP, and it's been elevated to 4.7% of the GDP 2015, 4.6, 4.7, and no one saw return in terms of employment, productivity, wage, income increase. Dozens of assessments have been made by public and private sector bodies or international bodies. So the assessments are rare. Assessments that show some positive effects are rare. So this fiscal incentives must be seen as a group, must be put inside the group reforms. So it's kind of a attempt of a fiscal reform in these years. Well, I'll get back to Professor Firmo, and I will not call you sir anymore. I'll call you, okay? And I'll ask you two questions. You to you both. The first one, it's I can't avoid it. It's the Transnordestina, the railway company. So we have governments in and out, and this railroad system never ends. And the second question is about this EPAs. In the state of Pernambuco, we have the ZPEs only announced on the billboards, but we had only raw land. I will ask Professor Firmo to answer that, and we will get back to Professor Alexandre Manuel. So, Professor Firmo, the Transnordestina project, it's an excellent project, at least in theory, and it's a project that, according to the government, we should have something about 1,700 kilometers arriving as well in the port of Pecém. And I would ask you why this project never ends. It's just only the blueprints. And when it leaves the blueprints, we advance to fill. And what's this project for Transnordestina may bring to the productive sector? Well, this your final observation gives me the opportunity to analyze to referentially what has been said about northeastern development is already put in place. So the retail, the good or bad retail, is a consequence. The first question is I call your attention to the fundamentals of the development in a region like Northeast is absolutely forgotten or unknown. The first question is about the region concept on the point of view geopolitical and under the federation umbrella, it doesn't exist. We have a federation and we have states and municipalities. So this regional manifestation will only have sense when we have decentralization of the federal power or aggregation in the state instances. Another important data that is to talk about integrated development of in a country as Brazil with continental dimensions, with all its differences, human differences and cultural and environmental. It means a lot to have the actions under the state's umbrella. So putting these two things together, history shows us clearly that in the first moment we've had these things apparently addressed. So the regional thing as an instance of intervention came with the Sudene creation, Superintendents of Development for the Northeast, a policy of decentralization from the federal government. By that time, the state government, they were single, they were without Brasilia, the state capital, and they used to reunite in a regional instance. So we've had a board of governors. It works like a regional parliament, but I reiterate that there the lots of things that they have been decided and forwarding of regional policy, but we've had some turn back. But then we have all the regional decisions we've had all the decisions approved by the National Congress. We've had a national fiscal subsidies policies destined to the regions, but only in the 60s, by the half of the 1960s. So it's been an experience that met the prerequisites to have a regional development in the Northeast, an integrated development in the Northeast. And I repeat that region that was gaining an institutional level of organization and also had the approval of the National Congress, but we've had a setback. And from the military government, we've had a re-centralization of public power. Brasilia has become the horizon of the state governments, and then they started to go straight from the states to the federal government, and the sense of a regional belonging, so finished, it ended. And then the constitution from 1988, the constitutional processes. So when it was developing the incentive subsidies and organization, the economic order principles. So we could have from 1988, from these constitutional processes, we could have a more promising future than the Constitution established. But despite the constitutional efforts, we have here now, till nowadays, Brazil disobeying almost every constitutional principle in favor of the development of the law of the less developed regions in Brazil. So we live this kind of retail. Sometimes you have a Bolsa Familia, a federal wage income program. We have some works. isolated, but we're far from the integration. We have the markets determining this integration, and the markets, they protect the hegemonic regions. And with this worldwide changing, uh, maybe things should seem to be a little bit different. But we don't have any definition today of what is happening to the Northeast development. You mentioned specifically the Trans-Nordestina, the railway system. It's an example, it's a clear example of a development region. It's not in the national agenda. Work like this takes dozens of years to take place, and it's being interrupted and interrupted, and it's unbearable from the point of view of the financial budget. So that's because we don't have a regional representative expression to take this to the National Congress. And after globalization, the regional subjects are secondary. We have some exploitations damaging the region for years, the FINOR, so hundreds of companies victims of bad behavior from the public administration. And we have also this FNE problem because of previous problems with interests, wrong interest policies, and they compromised the fund. So it's been a very difficult struggle. So in these last years of this Industrial Federation of Ceará has been doing lots of efforts to specific works like the transposition of San Francisco waters, yet to finish. But it's very difficult. The federal government doesn't talk the same language of the regional development. And just to conclude my speech, I need only to say that the prorogation of the tax incentives by Sudene, the superintendents for the development of the Northeast, has been fought by the accounting court, saying that it's been a fiscal renunciation not predicted in the budget, and maybe those incentives should not be prorogated. So this is childish behavior of those who doesn't know their audience. So it's a company spending with. It's important to have companies that have their installation subsidies, and when they production, they generate job posts, and when they generate uh, taxes, so it's not it's considered fiscal renunciation under future expectations, and then they say they could not proceed because it's a fiscal renouncement that will damage the fiscal balance. And the Trans-Nordestina is in this context as a project that doesn't advance, is very, very slow because of this regional subject that needs its lack of a regional policy of development, much more than we have, that comprehends, exceptuating the region, a national development, as the Constitution says, to fight inequalities. And I did this more general analysis because everything out of this context would be a very specific and fragile answer, not corresponding to our expectations for the northeastern region, making this region to participate in the national development, contribute to a bigger national development. Professor Firmo, thank you. Before pass the floor to Professor Alexandre Manuel, just do an addition, just confirming what you stated in the beginning of our talk. So we are insisting in that dilemma. The dilemma is the circumstantial issues are being more serious than the social emergencies in a circumstantial line are over the regional issues, and that's a dilemma that is being pushed on, being delayed during the years. And I would like Professor Alexandre Manuel, to answer these questions as well. I agree 100% with Professor Firmo when he talked about the political difficulties to define a region, because it's an abstract concept, and due to this difficult political issue to define this abstraction, trying to do the federal government to look at this in an integrated way, it seems to me that after 50 years that we decided to structure a set of policies to that to the northeastern region, it's not having the effect we desired in the decades of 1950 and 60. An example of this is that we've had 12 or 13% of the GDP in participation of the GDP of the Northeast region in the national GDP. And with this group of policies that Professor Firmo told us during the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, we have again the same 13%. We've had gains, segmented gains, but the overall, this collectivity, the gains, they seem to not exist. And then it's been a turnkey or a key turn, and we went to address the social issues, and it seemed to have a greater impact in the investing in the society directly with social gains and economical gains than these regional policies as traditionally we understand. And Professor Firmo's speech is a speech that could be more important, more placed in this debate, and to have some effectiveness, these policies in terms of effectiveness, because this political difficulties, and we see in the northeastern region of Brazil, some results that are very interesting. Northeastern region has been very well approached on Professor Tânia Bacelar works. We have rich spaces as we have in the south and the southeast regions, and we have even more poor spaces. Examples like to Brazil, like Ceará in education, the FUNDEB, the Fund for Education. I've had the opportunity to participate in this discussion last year. Every specialist in education must study the Ceará state's case. If we get the grades not only in the public educational network, if we get private educational network, so they have nothing to give, they let nothing to desire comparing to other rich states in Brazil. It makes me think, at least to put to you my opinion regarding the Trans-Nordestina issue. Maybe we have a difficult to change the mindset in this macro, to do the key turn in this macro against the macro against micro necessities. So interests, currency exchange rates, and more resources. When we have a giant agenda in the micro that horizontally in terms of potential could benefit more northeastern region than the other regions, but maybe the political articulation, regional political articulation, they have some difficult to look at this, maybe to the kitchen gas law, for example. So the gas, underground gas will benefit more the northeast than the south, and the southeast will have evident more job posts in lots of states. And maybe we have this difficulty in order to maybe to approve environmental licensing act, as Professor Fimo said, this about Trans-Nordestina, it's a consequence of lack of regional articulation. So good part of this Trans-Nordestina project is due to lack of this look to the northeastern region as a region. But we have land issues. We also have public administration issues. Some the public power has an enormous difficulty to, for example, to open small works. You have giant difficulties to regularize some public area, or to give indemnizations over private properties. And for example, you have some lands, some areas of work that you don't know what's the jurisdiction. So sometimes you see the law and it seems to be clear, but during the execution, you have lots of constraints and you have lots of people trying to undermine the works. And in Brazil, we have, it seems to me, the regional aspect. Have this look, maybe this look, this agenda, the gas, or the rail system milestone, or the navigation milestone, or the environmental licensing, and it seems to be general, not only something to blame the government, and also from the point of view of the demands that arrive from the private sector, and look at this in an overall way, and to forward this and to address this and see this as a regional solution that will boost the northeastern region, because otherwise we'll always get back to the scratch, lack of resources or high interests, or it may be part of the problem, but certainly it's far from being explained by the difficulty of the northeastern region to grow more or to integrate more to the other regions. And another point that could be placed, this political look, this integrated look to the region. So, in other words, by the region itself, but also to look to all these projects, all these micro problems, look into the regional point of view. So when we see this private problems, like private look from Ceará had, so the good intentioned people, business person in the 80s, without needing the government, without needing any external management, and they transformed the Ceará in this educational oasis. And as an example of tax policies, I think we have lack of integrated look in the Northeast. That's my point. No doubt, Professor Alexandre, I have no doubt about it. We keep talking about the structural and matters. So sometimes we have excellent projects like the Trans-Nordestina rail system project, and by lots of reasons these projects, they don't succeed, and then the government keeps positioning itself in helping the social with social issues, with emergential from emergential programs, and lots in these structural projects, they just don't happen. Just to make my approach a little bit more clear, that what I was trying to say when I talked about a regional jurisdiction, for regional formal jurisdiction, even by delegation, or from what happened to Sudani, for example, the Northeastern Superintendents of Development. So it should be very different, because it will be a landmark, a legal landmark, much different than to observe a group of politicians made, based on other objectives, and maybe not aware of the regional integration. It's not about to gather politicians together. It's to have a group of a true regional uh, endeavor with following the constitutional principles to address all the problems. So I would like to take in the example of Sudan and also the constitutional principles being disobeyed systematically. We haven't had planning, neither planning nor policies to develop regionally that can be considered technically. There are no policies. There are specific projects. So for the semi-arid, for the Trans-Nordestina rail system, the transposition of the San Francisco waters, and all these regulations, sectorial regulations, hitting Brazil as a whole, not only Northeast. If the Northeast takes advantage by its vocational features, it's something else. But it's not a development because of specific regional planning. No, I think historically, getting the example of Celso Furtado from the beginning and the efforts in 1988 in the constitutional efforts, we have nothing in the history that we can tell that it could evolve the regional planning and neither operation. We can say that DENOX, DNOCS, and Sudene, and letting alone the Northeastern Bank of Brazil. So letting this alone, it's over the decentralized institutional scheme. Globalization made this to be under shadows. It's not a matter of incentive. We have a very scaring data. If we compute the tax renouncement in Brazil, the greatest part is in the southeast of Brazil. Northeast of Brazil, there's no more than 10 or 15%. The free commercial zone from Manaus, another regional component, we have a minority parcel. So the markets and the government, they work in an invisible way, favoring the inequalities. It's very clear. It's the liberal way of thinking, and the state is not aware of this in a way that it tries to integrate the regions according to their necessities. The Amazon is an example. For how many years Amazon could have been approached in a very different way? That's the problem raising, because the international look upon Amazon, it's different. So the Amazon is seen as a global potential area. In northeastern region is almost a liability, and we need to be honest. So we don't have in Brazil regional jurisdiction very well established, whether federative, whether political, because the constitution has not been obeyed, and consequently we are in a vegetative evolution process. Couldn't be otherwise. But if we try to address this, and we need so to canalize these questions, these matters, to in order to do a rational work upon it. So exactly now we're talking about fiscal reform. So the fiscal system uh, is a fundamental instrument to balance the federation. So we talk about simplifying taxes, okay, obvious, but not only this. We don't talk nothing in the sense of rebalance the federation. The states are lost. They're in debt with the central government, what they can't pay. So in 1988, when the constitution has been made, the central government had the 50% of the national income. So the idea was to decrease to 40, and the states with 40, and the municipalities with 20%. So, and to share the the tax uh, report, we would share the tax over the wage, over the income, and nowadays the central government has 2/3 of the general income. general revenue. So the path is totally on the contrary direction. So towards the regional development. So on the contrary, the regional development would aggregate, not disaggregate. So I would like to let this clear. There are no policies. There are some documents, but from the operational point of view or administrative point of view, there hasn't been any. Sorry, I'd just like to add something on Professor Firmus. I agree 100%, and that's exactly what I tried to state. The difficult we have here in Brazil, and this macro discussion, this fiscal consolidation subject. So during the 80s to the beginning of the 90s, well, I think by the end of the 90s, basically, because we've had to discuss inflation and always the ghost of inflation pursuing us. But we don't have public policies with this regional look that Professor Firmo is advocating for. We don't have the policy in the policies, this regional approach. And from my point of view, this is not only to blame the government. It's to blame the demands, the regional demands, because we can't look nor neither from the political nor the academic side this regional problems, the micro problems, this agenda that hinders the development of the countries, or the oil and gas, energy sectors, the railroads, the rail system, and also the environmental should be fostered by these works. We have lots of difficulties, and we can't leave this demand from more resources that it would address the problem. Maybe because the lack of this institution, according to Professor Firmo, that have never existed. Sorry, developer policy that may be put in practice, actually in practice. So we we're moving in circles, and we have no policy put in practice about regional development. So I'd like to present only more two data. Well, I'm almost without time. I would like to ask you to final remarks. Just to mention two facts. In 80 years, we're not more than the half per capita income the population of Brazil. If you observe about tax renunciation, I've already told you, but if we talk about in this moment about fiscal reform, I talked about already, and I think everything is leading us to believe that we are in the same road, because the regional agenda is not part of the federal agenda. And yes, I agree, and it's unfortunately, I would like the image to Professor Manuel, please. And Professor Alexandre Manuel could close, give us his final remarks. We have to till 12:20. Okay, Professor Alexandre, I agree that it doesn't make part, and when Professor Firm talks more by the whole Northeast than the state of Ceará, because Ceará is an example to not being part of the problem, since a group of entrepreneurs reunited from the 80s, and they lead Ceará for the 7th or 8th position to the 2nd or 3rd position of a group of policies to improve the commercial environment, fiscal policies, and the attraction of companies. It makes Ceará an example, exporting brains to Brazil and to the world. And in a certain way, it's a counter example in this matter, that only this external federal support can address the northeastern problems. We have, yes, lots of microeconomic problems that need to be faced that would help the whole Northeast to grow and to decrease the distances, to integrate better the regions South and Southeast. So, okay, I agree as well with this. In terms of regions, they work through Northeast and they work through Southeast. So it's a very broadened subject. Ceará as a unit is far from reflect something similar to anything I stated. Ceará is a poor state, a poor unit, but we have some impulses that are very very honorable, but far from transforming Ceará in a state that should be considered rich or efficient or prepared economically to attend this population. We're very far. Let's not celebrate, in the wrong time. Professor Firmo, it extends thing to the others. Okay, why not? And I would like to talk about the ZPEs. I'm an academic. I'm a man from the market, the the foreign and the local market. And the ZPEs, they have been created by law and around 2008. And in practice, our ZPEs in northeastern regions in the Pernambuco state and in other states, they are only in the blueprints. But the ZPEs is a depart point to the external market, and it has kind of return, a tremendous return in terms of productive sector. So, and then you stop in this policy of, and we're talking about a regional policy, but with subsidies from the national policy. If we haven't, never leave the paper. So, Professor Firmo, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I've had a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I've heard about you, but I'm knowing you in person, between commas, in this new normal. And thank you very much for your participation, and also Professor Alexandre. I had the pleasure to meet in person, actually. Thank you for your positionings, your very strong positionings, strong statements. Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we keep under this dilemma, thinking about more in the circumstantial things than the structural things. Unfortunately, that's the dilemma, and it's being dragged out during lots of years. So you already gave your final remarks, and I wish you a good afternoon, and I wish good rest of journey, and I wish we meet in person in other opportunities. Thank you, thank you. Good journey, good continuation. I'm pleased to meet you, Alexandre. I'm pleased to Pimentel to participate in this program. We are at your disposal in other opportunities. Thank you very much. Thank you all coordinating this in the backstage. So our thanks to our panelists, to our participants, the infrastructure that integrates the Northeast in our Ceará Global of 2020. Much thanks to Alexandre Manuel, Firmo de Castro, and our mediator, José Pimentel. And our thanks to our audience watching us through our YouTube channel. So subscribe to our channel, give us a like, thumbs up, and follow our networks and our social networks. We are Ceará Global in all of them. Now we'll have a break here from the studio. You'll keep connected through our integrated platform in our digital city, and I see you in some hours. See you later. Thank you very much.